In the Tankless unit intro video, we introduced the underlying engineering scheme and the important subsystems: misting, freshwater, and concentrate. You know from that video that the misting system in Gen 3 Plus is virtually identical to the drum unit, so we're not going to cover that here. In this video, we're primarily going to focus on how the freshwater and concentrate subsystems in Gen 3 Plus work together to dose the insecticide in water. Now recall from the previous video that the Gen 3 Plus is a batch processor. It starts with a recipe that the technician programs into the controller. When it is time to build a batch, the water is supplied by the freshwater subsystem, and the concentrated insecticide is supplied by the concentrate subsystem. After that, the unit mixes the contents of the reservoir and the batch is ready to mist. But when is it time to build a batch? To illustrate the logic that Gen 3 Plus uses, let's pretend you were a bartender in an old private gentleman's club in downtown London. Every day, beginning around 11:30 in the morning, the members show up demanding martinis. They are cranky and impatient when they arrive, and it is unacceptable if they have to wait for their drink. Luckily, they each want them prepared the same way: 3 olives marinating in cold gin. No vermouth necessary. Your job is to keep a pitcher of the martinis always ready so they don't have to wait. The pitcher holds 5 martinis worth of gin, and it is extremely rare that more than 5 of the cranky old men arrive at the same time. So at 11:15, you mix up a full pitcher, 5 glasses of gin, and 15 olives. At 11:31, 2 of the old cranks show up demanding drinks, and you serve them. You know there are more right around the corner, so you hustle to refill the pitcher. What do you add? Well, obviously, 2 glasses of gin and 6 olives, right? Then another old crank waddles in and you serve him. Better refill the pitcher. You add a glass and 3 olives. At 11:39, a gang of 3 of the old coots hobble in. And one of the original 2 is ready for his second. So you serve 4. Then refill the pitcher with 4 glasses of gin and 12 olives. You get the picture. The pitcher is topped off after each pour, and the top off uses the recipe we started with: 3 olives per glass of gin. The Gen 3 works on exactly the same principle. The martini pitcher in Gen 3 is the batch tank. The gin and olives are the water and insecticide. And the cranky old members demanding lunchtime drinks are the nozzle circuit demanding mist. To rebuild the batch, it first replaces the fresh water that was pumped out during the previous mist. It then replaces the insecticide that went out with the water per the recipe. After that, it agitates the solution, and voila, the batch tank is full and ready to mist again. We call it leaving a shell in the chamber. Where does the recipe come from? You will find this information on the label of the insecticide you are misting. For a popular misting formulation called Riptide, the recipe reads: mix 0.5 gallons of concentrate in 55 gallons of water to yield a solution of 0.046% pyrethrins and 0.23% PBO. Different insecticides will require different recipes. In the Gen 3 Plus, this recipe is entered into the controller as a variable we call the mix ratio. The mix ratio is entered into the controller anytime a fresh bottle of insecticide is snapped into the unit. We'll go over that process in the video where we cover the replenishment cycle. Now let's discuss how the dosing process works in a Gen 3 Plus by looking at this schematic. After each mist cycle, the freshwater subsystem sequence begins. 1. The controller opens the inlet supply valve, here. And fresh water flows through the flow meter and regulator into the batch tank. Water continues to flow until 2. The float switch floats, which signals the controller to shut the supply valve. Step 3, the controller then reads the value that is accumulated in the flow meter. Step 4, the controller uses the flow meter value in the recipe, the mix ratio that we discussed earlier, to calculate how much insecticide needs to be added to the batch tank. It then calculates how long the dosing pump needs to run in order to pump the target amount of insecticide into the batch tank. After it's made that calculation, the controller activates the dosing pump and runs it for the desired duration. And finally, in step 5, the controller initiates an agitation cycle in the unit that thoroughly mixes the water and concentrate. The same reasons for wanting agitation in the drum unit, preventing scunge formation, apply to the tankless unit. So in addition to mixing after dosing, the unit agitates just like the drum systems, once daily and prior to each scheduled mist cycle. Now let's watch a video of this process at the unit, starting at the very end of a mist cycle. You can see from the pressure gauge that the mist cycle just ended. The LCD in the controller reads hold, which means the agitation valve is being held open, allowing the nozzles to close. Now, step 1, you can see water is entering the batch tank and the LCD reads fill, which means the controller opened the inlet supply valve. Now, step 2, the float switch moved up and the water has stopped flowing into the batch tank. The controller quickly reads the flow meter and does the insecticide calculations. Now the LCD reads dose, and the dosing pump is pumping fluid from the bottle into the batch tank, which is step 4. Now step 5 is happening and the unit is agitating the batch tank. So there's a shell in the chamber and the unit is ready to mist on command. Okay, you should now have a good understanding of the Gen 3 Plus, its component subsystems, and how they work together. We'll cover leak detection, which is standard in a tankless unit and an option in a drum unit in the next video.